economy. Now, you know as well as I do that rules are what makes a market. So the rules and regulations that will guide the operations of the planned integrated capital markets in West Africa were dug into by officials of key market institutions who spoke at this panel at the just concluded two-day program held this week in Lagos. Let's get some excerpts from their conversation.
So, question: the application of new technologies. So, today, for example, we have a platform that can actually handle trades and custody service, I mean the receipts of trade in terms of the post-trade things we do in multi-currency, multi-country form. We've not been able to use it because we've never needed it. And a whole lot of technologies which typically in the banking space, they've been able to go a little bit far because they play easily across regions that we've not been able to do. So I think the first thing for me will be the creation of more products. I mean, today we're looking at it just from a singular angle of people being able to trade across places, but I see a whole lot more products coming up from these initiatives. Product from the data that will be cutting across the region, products from the other business opportunities that will come in. A lot of intermediary products will come up naturally. And all these things in today's world would play into the fintech space, which, because of how we have been, structured, the new tech guys have not been able to come into our market. So I think the first opportunity for me would have much more products, which will create much more onboarding of people into the market. Today, you look at the investor base, not just in Nigeria, across the entire region, or people involved in the capital market. It's less than 2% of the banking space, active, less than 2%. Comparing it even to insurance, the insurance field, they've been screaming that they are not having good penetration, but the equity space is so small, even compared to insurance. As at the last time I got the data, we're not doing up to 10% of what they do in insurance. So if we come in and we're able to apply new technologies, expand the market, create liquidity, onboard more people, then we'll have more things happening in the market. The second aspect for me will be in terms of insight into the real wealth base of this region. We have a lot of funds that are outside the regulatory markets. A lot of funds, crowdfunding, a lot of things happening. And it hurts us, even though we are regulated, even though we are not involved, because people buy into them without knowing they are not regulated. Eventually, they lose their trust in the markets within the region. So expanding the region, allowing new tech people to come in, would be able to get on board some of the people who are shy of entering the market because they look at the size of the market. They look at the regionalization which they get on other platforms, which they cannot get.
Regulations. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it earlier. Surprisingly, I'm the only operator, or at least who creates products, sitting down here at the moment. And the kind of factors we're talking about is have the right regulations in place. Now, if you have the right regulations in place, everything else will follow. Because what you find is information drives markets. And possibly just like one of the questions I asked today. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, the first US dollar mutual fund was created in this country. Now, at the last count, I think we have close to about 29 of them. If, for example, there's a fund manager and any Nigerian wants exposure to Ghana, they can either create a single currency product or they can create a product, multi-currencies, of which each of them have shares. And I say that if you look at in Dublin, for example, you'll have a unit trust that has a euro component, a sterling component, a dollar component, and so on and so forth. Now, it engenders that there have to be rules and regulations in place to ensure that that can happen. Currently, we don't, and it's possibly because it has not been brought to the fore of the regulators. Now, currently in Nigeria, we only have, as I said, Naira and dollars. But somebody might add to that fund and equivalent across. So what you need is the right rules and regulations. Now, when you drill down below that, as has been spoken earlier, harmonization of tax, harmonization of the rules and regulations themselves, harmonization of reporting. All these need to be in place because there's no point in a fund manager sitting down here in Nigeria and say, I want to invest in a stock in Ghana, and they can't get the annual report. Or they can't even get anything about the company other than do a search on Google, and the information out there is outdated about 4 or 5 years ago. So all these need to be in place. It might seem as if I'm talking about the problems or whatever, but to be honest, rules and regulations get updated all the time, and we need to start from somewhere to move on and ensure this is all successful.
I think that with this integration issue, there are different models. So if, for example, you are looking at the EU model, which is everybody practically the same, MiFID does all that work, practically the same regulations, or you have an ASEAN type of model, where what you are doing is trying to harmonize the regulations. So on certain things, say for example, financial reporting, harmonization, everybody use IFRS. Instead of somebody saying I use Nigerian GAAP, another person says I use Ghana GAAP. Harmonize all the reporting regulations. So I think what needs to be done is to look at all the areas where you need regulation and decide for each area how far you will go. So I've given an example with financial reporting because of how important financial reporting is, not only for the region, but also people who may want to use the reports outside the region. You could decide that that one is critical enough that you want to do full harmonization. Everybody across the region that is harmonized use IFRS. You could, however, look at something like minimum operating standards for brokers across the region, because you want to ensure that you could, the investors everywhere have a similar sort of level of comfort. But it doesn't have to be done exactly the same. It's some sort of reciprocity, complementarity, those types of adjectives will be what you will use to describe what you've created. But it helps the point that Michael has made in the sense that because the authority in Ghana recognizes what has been said by my authority in Nigeria, I can participate in Ghana. I don't have to go through, all the things that a Ghanaian broker has to do, and so on and so forth. So I think, again, those are just two examples because of time. But it's choosing, that issue of choosing what tool to use for what issue that comes up is very critical. And I think that's an area where the regulators really have to sit down and have the conversations. Also, I know that you're putting the microphone, so maybe you're trying to. I think you also need to look outside the capital market. So sometimes when we are thinking about things in the capital market, we think we only have to talk to the people in the capital market. No, you need to talk to the tax people. You need to talk to the AML-CFT people. That's the NFIU in Nigeria. You need to talk to CAC. There's a whole slew of ecosystem that have to be engaged and have to be made aware of what the capital market regulators are doing so that they can come along. Otherwise, if that ecosystem is also not carried on board, you will have a problem there.
Of course, there are the known risks of you doing what you understand. And there's the unknown risk, because now you're trading across another region or another country within the same sub-region. You could be importing another risk by trading with them. Those ones you may not even understand. So now if I'm trading with Ghana, for example, you made a comment about the videos being available. I know Ghana is here represented. I've seen their reps as well. I'm not sure whether anyone from the UEMOA region is here, but I'm sure we have, it will be recorded and the messages will be passed across. So there are different levels of risk. Now the CMOs or the operators or the investors' minds will need to be open to this, should I say, increased number of slew of risks. However, I don't think they will be distinctly peculiar to a region. I don't think so. It will be easier for you to deal with Ghana, understanding Ghana politics, understanding their own technological pace, than you sitting here and dealing with somebody on London Stock Exchange. Because the dynamics is a bit different. If in Nigeria, it follows the same rule of economics, they increase MPR in Nigeria and it changes the dynamics of the equities market. Whether in London, even the anticipation of it being increased can distort the whole market. You may not be able to say. So, but back to your question, I think the way I'll answer it is two things: manage the known, which is educating people, helping them identify risk and putting in mitigants. Then two, managing the known, which is people knowing deliberately these are the risks, and they still go to, should I say, put investors' capital at risk or distort the system, put enough deterrence. And deterrence doesn't have to be a stick all the time. It could just be a delay, or it could just be forced education. Imagine somebody doing something wrong, and instead of penalizing you, I said, okay, your punishment is to make sure you do 6 modules relating to risk trading across Africa, and you must pass with a minimum score of 98%, or else you won't trade. I mean, those are like different things you could do.